Hello, my name is Perry McAllister, and I will be doing my speech on a short history of pulp fiction art and pulp fiction, science fiction art. Um, I thought to start with a joke, but considering I kind of started my way through the introduction, I figured it's best to just get into it.
Need a joke.
Okay, this article is from the blog site IO9. It was written by Natalie Boccolini, and it basically gives a brief overview of the history of pop art in the late 1800s to mid 1900s. The reason it's called pop art is pulp art is because it was actually because of the sort of paper that it was printed on. Even this very heavy sort of bark, so they just kind of adopted that, and all the art had this very similar style to it. Despite being popularized in the 1900s, it was actually started in the 1860s. The earliest examples were found on broadsheets, which were basically sort of like the 1800s version of newspapers. It was these very big broadsheets with they would have like a gigantic picture on them, but very small text. Like the typography on them was actually really bad. You could barely read it in a lot of cases. So you kind of had to go to the picture to give you the story and really help you understand what was going on. Obviously there was no color because that was just way too expensive for them. A lot of it was all black and white art, but it was this very sort of stark art that really caught your attention almost immediately. One of the examples used in the article was this picture of where they imagined what sort of like military tech they would have in the Middle East would be a camel basically mounted with a machine gun. It was a very odd picture, but it's basically what the best they could approximate other countries would develop over time. Richer people had it better. Their books they tended to have these really thick, well-developed books that had this beautiful typography and beautiful art. You open it up and you see these very well-developed pictures. And they were just generally better made. It's important to note that as time goes on, that though pulp art was very well made in a lot of cases, it was never necessarily popular because of that. The composition tended to be pretty poor. Perspective tended to get messed up a lot. It was more the concept that they were selling people on at the time. For example, one of the covers featured a steam robot pulling a cart, and it was a very sort of popular cover during the time. And during the early 1900s, Art Nouveau, which was basically a very rebellious style of art. It was basically just like all the younger artists sort of telling the older artists, like, get out of town, we're going to do this our way now. And when it gets a lot of what had been established as conventions of art, began to sort of make its way into popular mainstream because it helped pulp artists sort of define the genre for themselves and do things their own way. And two very important people in the pulp art world were Hugo Gernsback, who coined the term science fiction and created the magazine Amazing Stories, which helped popularize pulp art, and also created Modern Electronics just because he really loved technology, really loved sort of exploring these different worlds. And the illustrator on modern technology was Frank R. Paul, who became a major influence on science fiction art in the future, and his art had a lot of glaring issues. His perspective was often bad. He couldn't draw people at all. He had a lot of garish use of red and yellow, but he really had a good feeling for what he thought the future would be like, and that sort of could always be seen in his art. And that's all.